Hello and welcome to BT Media's In Conversation With series. Today it's a delight that we're travelling further afield to the Middle East, specifically Muscat and Oman, where I welcome Ashley Roberts, who is General Manager of Omanexpo. Good morning.
Thank you, Dan.
Or good afternoon, shall I say?
Good afternoon here.
You're 4 or 5 hours ahead, right?
4 hours ahead.
4 hours ahead. And also, because I like to do this, I've checked the weather where you are, and it's like 28 degrees.
There's one season, pretty much. It's summer.
Yeah, lucky you. I'm staring out a very drizzly grey morning. So we'll have to come and visit you and experience that all ongoing summer. Ashley, we've got quite a bit to talk about, but it's great to have you on because I'd like to get our viewers who are not aware of the region you work in, a sense of how you operate over there. So if you can firstly, though, explain a bit about yourself and bring your career to life and how you ended up in that part of the world.
Yeah, of course. So I've been in the exhibition industry my entire working life, so 20 plus years in the industry. I started off with a business called IMOC Communications. People you would know, actually, funny enough, Justin Opie, lots of people from Blenheim, Miller Freeman, so real movers and shakers in the industry, really strong, talented individuals. And I cut my teeth at a very early age with those individuals and learned a lot. It was a fun, exciting place to work. We then subsequently got acquired by V&U Business Media, who then in turn got bought by Incisive. So I spent about 8 years working with them in duration, which was fantastic. Loved it all. And throughout that time, I was working predominantly, or in fact, primarily B2B events. After that, I then went to Ocean Media, where I headed up the national wedding portfolio events. So going from B2B to B2C was it's quite a radical learning curve because it was doing things quite differently. And of course, the core skills were transferable, but it gave me an insight into what I sort of like to coin the ultimate client, which is the visitor. There were people coming planning their weddings. It was fantastic to see, and a lot of that stuck with me. Talking about one of the posts I put on LinkedIn this week was about the visitor experience, and that stayed with me. After that came along an opportunity to go to the Middle East. So I then worked in Dubai and the United Arab Emirates with D&G events for a little over four years, launching stuff all over the world. So although I was in the Middle East, I did one event in the Middle East, which was in Kuwait. So I was launching stuff in Africa from places like Nigeria, through to Kenya, through to Morocco, Southeast Asia, stuff in Indonesia, as well as subcontinent in India. So although I was in the Middle East, I spent most of the time elsewhere, but it was fantastic. I loved it, working with people of all creeds and colours from all over the world, and that was something I really cherished. That experience of giving me different dynamics about peoples, different cultures, different ways of doing things. And then came the time I had a young family, transitioned back to the UK, where I worked with GES for just under 2 years, to enter the supply side, which again I take a lot from that. But I looked at organisers with green-eyed envy. I miss being an organiser big time. And along came an opportunity to come back out to the Middle East and join a company called Omanexpo, which is where I am now. So very outside the country, not really known. It's owned by a very influential family in the country. We're the biggest player here. Very ambitious, and it's just an exciting time to join a business such as Omanexpo.
And thank you for that. So, I mean, you've got a really rich and diverse background, right? Both supply side, organizer side, trade show, consumer, international. That's fantastic. And in terms of what the Omanexpo does at the moment, we'll obviously come on to the pandemic and all sorts of things. But in a nutshell, what does it do? And who does it
we focus on events that would that work across what you'd call pillars of economy. So this part of the world. No gas, energy, so primarily oil and gas. So we run the national oil and gas events. It's one of the biggest oil and gas events, or should I say energy, because it's transitioning towards sustainability. That's a key theme that will grow in the coming years. So that's one of the events. Other events such as construction, food, hospitality. So we've got quite a diverse spread of events. But what we're now starting to do is to grow outside of Oman. We're looking at where the key growth areas. We've got, we're dominant within the local market, but there is huge growth potential in the Middle East. Middle East is what I would coin a frontier market. Of course, you've got places like Dubai, which are exceptionally mature, well established, and some world-leading events there. But you've got other countries, other destinations where there is real potential to be realised. So we've got a number of events. We've got 3 events, big events and large scale that we're launching in 2022. With some additional events to be added in subsequent following years. So we're really ambitious, but as you said, we'll come on to COVID. We've been taking stock and using time very wisely, or we like to think anyhow.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all people have had at this moment, right? Time. And actually, I guess possibly one of the positives of COVID, if it had to happen, which it has, is that people had the time to focus on their business. And as you said, focus on their customer, which if you're running a show where the consumer or trade show is a visitor, and understand that sort of visitor journey. Can you sort of bring to life, and I know you've worked in many different territories, but there are some good stories and some horror stories about organisers and not just event companies. I was talking to a PR expert the other week who was fantastic here and also fantastic in Australia, but their business bombed in New York. In your opinion, what's the sort of challenges that you face when you either as an individual or as an organizer setting up a show in a different region, and how do you overcome those? Yeah,
just assuming something works in one country definitely does not mean it's going to work elsewhere. There is, there's, people talk about geo-cloning. I think it goes much further. I mean, I use the term geo-adapting because, if it's a portfolio of event or a brand that you are transitioning somewhere, there is, that, logical bit that it's a brand you're taking somewhere. You've got a client base, whether it's your international agents or some of your direct clients that you will be transitioning to another market. The first thing, we do this with any of the events. We speak to government, we understand their agenda. How our events can serve the needs of the local market, and that's talking from end user, and by that I mean the visitor, the ultimate client, as I coined it earlier. And through that we do many things, such as advisory panels. Right. So we will go out there and see the whites of people's eyes. We're in the business of selling the medium of face to face.
Sure.
So we get on a plane, we will go to the country where we're to launch an event, and we'll spend time speaking to the local market and understand, legislation, whether it's construction, if there's a certain legislation that governs how they build, how they go about construction, or whatever vertical that is. So understanding the local market is really the starting point. In parallel, you need to speak to your client base, whether that's international agents or your direct clients, and understand, is there an interest there? Yeah. Organizers, very creative individuals by nature, but you need to at every point sanity check. We believe in it. Is that what the market wants? To speak to the end user, the visitors, and go to your clients. Are they going to follow us? Are they going to come and support us as well?
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point about the geo-cloning, which is used a lot, right? And I think you're right. It's not just as simple as cloning it and putting it there. You have to, as you said, adapt. And what about venue ownership? Can you give us a sec? Because obviously in the UK, I think one of the explanations, if you like, for the reason of government maybe not understanding or opening the events industry, or at least even giving us a roadmap to, is the venues are in the main owned by private organisations. Obviously in Germany they're not, so there's more of a relationship there between the communities. What about in your part of the world? How does that work, and how does that impact on things that are happening?
Yeah, I mean, you gave a great comparison between the UK and Germany.
Yeah.
It's stark contrast. We know with Germany, obviously, that has slightly changed as sure. We've had the second rise.
Yeah.
But looking more specifically here to the Middle East, in answer to your question, a great example, I think, one of the best is Dubai World Trade Center. They are phenomenal. The PR and marketing machine that comes out of Dubai. What they've established is incredible. And events, tourism is fundamental to their economy there. And with that goes hand in hand is events. You've also then got AdNec, and AdNec are really, people, it's a sleeping giant. There is great opportunities to be had there as well. A lot of them are government owned, so it can be bureaucratic at times. Although they are run as commercial identities, they're not. They're government owned and they're governed by government. So sometimes that can be frustrating. It can slow it down, but that's not always a given. It's like anything in life. It's about owning relationships at the right levels, whether it's government or it's private. If you've got those contacts and you've got a shared vision, or people buy into what you truly want to do, they'll give you that level of support. And the advantage when it's a government-owned venue is they can open the doors that actually a private entity may not be able to do, or they can do it much quicker. So you've got the downsides, but you need to balance that with the positives that come with it as well. Sure.
And obviously there's influence from the Middle East within the ownership of some of the venues in the UK as well. Have you been privy to discussions at that level in terms of what they think of what's happening in Europe and the UK in terms of the events and exhibitions industry?
Yeah, they do. I mean, I think certainly I can speak for the Middle East. Yeah. They look to the UK. UK is part of the bedrock of the exhibition industry. I mean, you look at the FTSE 500. There are many of the world's biggest organisers that are listed there. Some are also private. So they look there for inspiration and examples. I don't want to name names, but I think people would probably be surprised by how the UK government has treated the events industry, but in particular the trade that we're talking here, the exhibition industry. Pretty surprised. And I think, are they missing an opportunity? Of course, we would say absolutely they are. Yeah. Exhibitions are pivotal to restarting the economy. We've got a crucial role to play. We were there to provide the Nightingale hospitals. Contractors like GS, among many other suppliers, were there, and then they've just gone.
That's the irony of it, right? Yeah. I know we're going to go on to it. I mean, that the irony is, and you obviously supply side as well, that they were expected, if they wanted to as well, sort of put up, as you said, hospitals and triage centres, and then the very places they're in were sort of left behind in terms of what they were meant to be doing. COVID hits. Can you explain what because we obviously have press conferences here, or we did daily. We see what's going on in the States and a bit of Europe. Maybe for your viewers, how did COVID generally impact where you are?
Yeah, I guess unlike lots of parts of the world, in the Middle East has a lot of business that comes through the Far East, in particular China. So any of our events, we have a large proportion of Chinese participants that fall through a Chinese pavilion. So we started to feel this quite early on. We started to get rumbles of this probably mid-late China, even before it was really being featured in the mainstream Western media. We didn't really know what it was at that point, and we'd gone through SARS and other stuff before that. So we thought it's not going to be as big. It might be focused on Southeast Asia. It's not.
This was around January time, was it? Maybe, or even before.
Late December, we started to. I say to feel it. We started to hear it. Yeah. We started to feel it in January, and we had our two biggest events planned for March, both of them in March, and really quite quickly we started to realise this was a much bigger problem than we first realised, and then it was Chinese started to pull out, and Chinese on some of our events. You're talking 10-15% of the entire show. Right. So taking that out when you're so near to an event was tough. And that made us dig deeper and start to look further and understand what was really going on. One of the events that we run the national health event. So Oman Health is the exhibition conference. So we had roots to the top with the Ministry of Health here, and in particular their team looking at communicable diseases. That are close to WHO, World Health Organization. So we really quickly got in, spoke to them. None of us are scientists, although all of us like to think we're scientists now. We've read so much about COVID.
Especially my mother, because she reads the Daily Mail every day, and I tell her not to because there's a cure for cancer one day, and then this another day.
Yeah, and, you know, everyone's become an expert, and we realised we're no experts, and we needed to go to people that are in the know, that have got access to the right information.
Sure.
And we said, look, our event's going to happen. They told us very quickly, we are advising you. We know it's coming our way. We encourage you to pull it. Now, we weren't being told it's going to be cancelled, but coming from the Ministry of Health, we felt that we needed to do something, and we felt that we either needed to make that decision or it would be forced upon us. So quite early on, as early as probably February, we took the decision to cancel those events, thinking that this might last a few months. And, you know, this year's panned out, and where we're at presently, we've had no events. Our last event from Omanexpo was back in 2019, October.
Wow.
We're starting to look like the events are going to come back early part next year. And we've spent time investing with that additional time we've had. You know, we'll come on to things, but maybe as you mentioned earlier about Dan, virtual and stuff, so I don't want to cover what we made up. Yeah. It's been tough. It's been tough. There's no getting away from that, but we've learned a lot, and we take a lot of solace from that.
Sure. And you're aware that I interviewed Chris Skeeth from the AEO last week. What sort of industry bodies, if any, and I'm ignorant to this, and I'm sure many people viewing this won't know either, are there any sort of industry bodies for that region that have been there to support you in any way, shape or form?
Yeah, there are. We're members of both UFI and the AEO.
Okay.
And they both, you know, take, for example, the UFI secure guidelines. You know, we're working with Oman Convention Exhibition Centre. It's privately owned, but it ultimately sits under government here under the Ministry of Tourism. We've geo-adapted, I'm going to try and not use this word or term again, those guidelines to make them specific. And where I use the adapted, you know, in there it had nothing to do with places of worship. So for prayer, for example, which being in an Islamic Muslim country, we need to cater for that. So we've taken their foundations and we've adapted it for our shows. So UFI's helped us do that. In particular, AEO, and I'm not just saying it because you mentioned Chris, but they've been phenomenal. Right. You know, and both UFI and AEO for different reasons. What we've, you know, AEO cater for global organisers. It's UK centric, absolutely.
It extends to that region. It's helped you in that region. Okay, because I didn't know that, I have to be honest. So
I guess it's aimed at UK organisers that have got interests elsewhere in the globe.
Yeah.
I've grown up my entire time in the UK that, you know, it's been a pillar of the industry, the exhibition industry, the AEO. So I know the value. I've benefited from training, network, etc. And also for us as Raise Your Profile, that was the reason we wanted to get to be a member of the AEO. But actually, it's paid dividends. You know, the networking events, so they have different ones that are centric to UK organisers, but they've also extended that to international organisers. And, you know, we're talking to people through these groups that Chris and his team engineer in the Far East, in the US. Yeah. We're all learning from each other because we've never been through this before on such a scale.
That's really good. As I said, I didn't know how far it reached. You know, obviously I've learned more over this period. But it's good to hear that it's also sort of touching the region you're in, because I guess there's quite a few expats from the events industry that are over there as well, right? So they would have had the same experience as you with the AEO and made sure that the organisation they're with over there is signed up. What about government support? Because obviously over here we've had furlough schemes, which is great, but it's a bit of a blunt instrument. Freelancers have been left behind, self-employed, it's all been a bit, you know, whilst there's a lot of money being spent, some people still haven't got the benefit of it. What about over there for event professionals?
It varies from country to country. I mean, I can talk with conviction on Oman.
Yeah.
You know, Oman, compared to the UK, where you've had a furlough system that you've mentioned, for example, they're very different countries. You know, this is an oil and gas rich country. Yeah. So we didn't just have COVID, we had a significant drop in oil price, you know, plus $100+, versus 40, 30 at a low point. So we've been hit on two levels. So it's ripped apart the economy here really quickly, literally overnight. Now, you've also got to think we're expats, we work here, we're fortunate that we don't pay tax.
Yeah.
But the downside to that is you've got to take the good with the bad. So you can't say, I'm not paying tax. In the good times, I benefit from that, and in the bad time, go cap in hand.
Yeah.
Please, Mr. Government, Mrs. Government, can we have some money? We are an Omani business. I don't own the business. We are an Omani business, and there are mechanisms to support SMEs within the country.
Right.
They have that, and they offer that. We're in a fortunate position with the founders and the owners of the business. We've been in a position to weather the storm, and I think a lot of that we've been self-sufficient. We've been fortunate, but there comes a time you can only go so far. We're hoping that this is coming to an end because it's not limitless in terms of how long it can be sustained. So in terms of government support, it's been there if it's been required through the forms of underwriting loans through banks, similar to the UK scheme such as that. But there's been no measures such as furloughs. Yeah. But there has been measures that there has allowed employees to offer certain measures, reduced hours based on reduced pay. So legislation has adapted to the times, which we have needed to implement in certain cases.
Yep, no, fair enough. And so we're going to talk about the future in a minute. Talk to me about virtual events. Have you immersed yourself as a business, as an individual within that over the last 6 months? Because everyone's been doing it, the pivot to virtual. What's your view and what have you done?
Yeah, a good example to give is our oil and gas event, Oman Petroleum and Energy Show. When we were looking at postponing it, we worked really closely as part of the executive committee for that event, the likes of BP, Schlumberger Oil, all the big operators in the oil and gas industry on a global level, at sea level. We spoke to them and said, do we virtualize it? We're not going to be able to do this physically. And they were very uneasy about it. And these are companies that are used to doing stuff in the virtual landscape. Their suggestion, which was the right thing and we agreed with, was to take it to the market and ask the sponsors and exhibitors of the event. So we conducted a poll, and out of 500 odd exhibitors and sponsors, we had about 300 odd recipients reply. 99%, and I'm not making that figure up, it was 98 point something, said, wait until you can do it physically. They just didn't want virtual.
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, having worked during the time for a company and spoken to others, some people just went into it, right, without asking customers, I guess, because there was a commercial imperative. So it's almost like, whether they want it or not, we're going to try and force it down their throats because we need some money, which you can sort of understand. And then obviously there's the more sort of sit back and talk to the customer route and see what they actually want. So you didn't do you didn't virtualize anything that would have happened during that period at all?
We are, and if I explain it, so for that event, what we were talking about as a proposition was taking a large-scale exhibition and conference and transitioning it onto line. We felt that was not the right thing for it. It wasn't going to be in keeping with the standard of event we wished to deliver. And that I'm not speaking ill of any virtual events, because there are some phenomenal ones out there that serve a purpose. The way we have looked at it is we immediately out the gates, we thought we've got to do something virtual. It was that knee-jerk reaction. We have to do something. We have to do something to keep engaged with the audience and generate some revenue. Exactly what you were saying. We slowed it down and we said, everything we do, we've got to sustain. And it's not just going to be on a whim. It's something actually we sustain into the future. And the one, some of the positives from COVID is we've realized actually we've looked at our events and there's an audience we're not talking to because we don't have a strong enough digital offering.
Yeah.
So we're doing a number of things. This year, we're doing buyer-seller meetings. So in essence, they are virtual exhibitions, but they are close events. And they are buyer-seller meetings. So we're prefix meeting in advance, and then there's some open networking opportunities.
Okay.
That's one. We've done some webinars. So we've done some webinars with people like Ernest Young, EY, on very pertinent topics like COVID, managing your business through COVID. But everything we've done or will be doing, we will sustain that, and it will be part of the mix of our physical events going forward. So it could be a webinar. We have that in the build up to an event, giving teasers of the event.
Yep.
It could be, in the case of our conferences, we have a online element of it. Someone, for example, in Brazil wants to find out the topics that are being streamed. They can pay a reduced fee for streaming that. You know, our core business is the face-to-face, it's the physical exhibition.
Yeah.
Things have moved on so quickly this year, and actually it's an eventuality that's just, COVID's been the catalyst, that we see that as a positive, that actually it opens up new revenue streams, but probably more important, it opens up to greater audiences and it allows us to remain engaged with audiences rather than just 3 or 4 days of a physical event. It's a year-round platform.
Sure, and I think you're right. And again, most people I talk to, it's all about the best way to serve that community, right? So is the best way to serve it just with a 2-day event, or is it, you know, 365 as people talk about, or whatever? I guess there's always going to be vested interest behind that decision because, you know, trade show organisers specifically, you know, some of them have had it very good for long periods with good margins. And I guess, and I'd be interested in your view, people talk about hybrid. I'd be interested to know what it means for you, because again, people I talk to are nervous about giving away all the content online, at the same time as the show. So then people won't come to the show. But if they don't give enough online, then there's not enough eyeballs to sponsor. So what's your vision of the future in terms of how the fusion between virtual and physical?
Yeah, I don't think fear is ever a good motivation or not a motivation to do anything. I don't think it is. So, you know, me personally, and I try and instill that at the team, and I believe they're sharing that, is don't do something or not do it because you're worried about it. Do it because it's the right thing to do. In terms of hybrid to me is, you know, events is about serving a community, you know, whether it's construction, it's oil and gas, it's health. There is a defined community that we're serving. Historically, we typically have served them for 3, 4, 5 days, however long the physical event is. Yeah, we've had a website, we've got social media presence, but what are we doing year round to generate content, provide sticky sites to get people to continuously come back? And ultimately, we spend so much time investing, you know, 2, 3, 4 month marketing campaigns, building up to get people to come to the event where it culminates. Why don't we make it easier for ourselves and build that audience all year round, you know, become much more informative. We can add greater value to our clients by, you know, they're an exhibitor, but we provide them a platform that serves them a greater sales and promotional cycle throughout the year. I think it's win-win for everyone. Organisers very much at the heart of that, as long as it's the right commercial model. It's going to benefit the audience, the visitors, and the clients are going to benefit because there's a longer shelf life in terms of the promotion around a physical exhibition.
Yeah, and then also, in my opinion, it should, from a cost perspective, should reduce the cost per acquisition of a delegate, potentially, because they've already been with you on that journey all year round. And so you don't necessarily have to spend that much again to try and get them to the show. As you know, typically you might have a 6 or 8 week sort of visitor promotion campaign beforehand, and then you don't talk to them again. So the data's old when you try and go back to them. You haven't got any new people, and so on and so forth. So that's where I see the benefit as well. In terms of mobilising people to go to physical events in the future, so regardless of what the government says, right, anywhere, you can do an event. That doesn't mean someone is going to want to go. What's your view in terms of getting people mobilised to attend the physical event? From a confidence perspective, how can we sort of instill that in them?
I love what I do. I love the industry I work in. I believe there is massive pent-up demand. Look, human beings, by nature of the beast that we are, we crave human interaction almost as much as food and water. It's something that's instilled in us naturally. I feel that when people are given the opportunity to do that, as long as it is conducted in a safe and conducive environment, people will do it. There is going to be a certain element of people, and also for medical reasons, that they shouldn't be going because they might be high risk, underlying medical conditions, whatever it might be. I feel that you're going to have it, but I think that's not a bad thing. I also think that people that go to events will be massively motivated. There will be highly motivated individuals. So there'll be less tide kickers going to our events. You know, we all focus on quantity. We want tens of thousands of people come to our event. Ultimately, it's about quality. It should always be about the quality. And it's treated as a bit of a cliche, but it's true.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think also it's going to force organisers to work harder on their content, right? Because if people now are going to get up and go and risk, there is always going to be a risk, right? And obviously we're going to mitigate the risk with these safety procedures. but they're going to have to want to go, right? So, you know, we're going to have to come up with better content, better reasons for people to get up and go. And I think that can only be a good thing for the communities we serve. Sorry, go on.
No, I couldn't agree more with that. I think, like you said about, you know, highly successful exhibitions that have had it good. And look, I don't wish this upon everyone. It's been an awful time. But in tough times in adversity, there are opportunities. It makes you, you know, I use the analogy of taking a boat out of the water. You can't do that in normal times. We've had the opportunity to take a business and look at it in isolation, think, right, we've got an opportunity to force all the problems to the surface here. And, you know, that's been forced upon us. We've got to learn from this and carry those lessons learned forward. Yeah,
rather than going back to just doing the same thing because of vested interest. Ashley, I've read obviously a lot on your social media posts, and generally we read about mental health and well-being at this time and managing teams. Can you give us your view on that aspect of you know, the period that we've been going through?
COVID's something that's uniquely affected all of us in pretty much the same way. So it's something that we've been forthcoming about talking about, and you know, the mediums and forums, should I say, that we've used are things like company monthly town halls, where people can ask questions anonymously, or they can open it to the floor and ask me questions, and I will answer as truthfully and as honestly as I can. If I can't answer there and then, I will always come back to the individual or the collective team to respond to it. We've worked with, or we're looking to work with Stress Matters.
Okay.
So Laura from Stress Matters. I've worked with her previously when I was at GS, and just about providing another layer of support from professionals. I mean, look, I'm not a health worker. I'm not trained in it. I'm an individual, and I like to think I've got a good ear and I'll listen to people. And I'm going through this so I can talk through personal experience. But we're looking at actually bringing in a professional to provide some pragmatic support and advice on the situation. But I think the most important thing is to talk about it. You know, and that's made more difficult by a lot of people at the beginning of this when we were all working remotely.
Yeah.
You know, at that point we had about 34 people within the business. We had subsequently, unfortunately, had to let some people go. But we've not just myself, all the line managers have gone out their way to take time out and speak to people. And you know, with its weekly, monthly catch-ups, it's putting the business to one side for a second and ask, how are you? You know, and if people don't want to talk, they don't want to talk, and we need to respect that.
Yeah.
But when they're ready to, we're there ready to listen. And not all the time can you provide them an answer or the support they need, but we try. But the most important thing I think we can take is to listen to people.
Sure. And are you mostly now back at the office? Like, are people mostly back at the office? So you are, right. When they weren't, what sort of things did you put in place in terms of people working from home, in terms of measurement and accountability? Because you don't want to be too overbearing. You still, if it's possible, want people to do their work. What advice for leaders, I guess, over here, where most people now, because we're sort of in a semi-pseudo lockdown, and generally it's going to be for a while until people work in the office, like long term. What advice would you give them in terms of that balance between, you know, making sure people are still doing their work but not being micromanaging?
I think on the employer's side, it's about having trusting people. You know, it doesn't mean that you need to have your staff necessarily working from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m.
Yeah.
People work differently, and we do even when we're in the office.
Yeah.
You know, and people having to get used to something that some cases people have never done before. You also had individuals that had children, and bear in mind, schools were all shut. You know, their partner, they were going through the same. They were probably juggling a job. So we had to be understanding to that. So one rule didn't apply to everyone. You had to look at each case in isolation, but try and be as consistent as possible. From the employee side, the one bit that we did instill is absolute accountability. People had a job to do.
Yeah.
And they needed to do that. And if that meant, you know, they start at 9 o'clock opposed to 8, and they work a bit later, not take lunch, that was down to them to engineer and to come with. So as long as they were doing the job to a high standard, we accept that. We found out some people actually, they performed better during lockdown. And there's an element of working remotely that we will stick with us. We need people in the office. We work in a team. We want to get people to get together. But if there's a reason that they need to work from home, we're not going to force them to come into the office as long as there's a good reason and they maintain their work. And it's about having that trust on the employer's side and accountability from the employees.
Yeah, I think you're right on trust, because ultimately you hire staff in the first place and you think they're good to do the job, right? So as long as you set them outcomes which are achievable, and ways to give them the tools to do that and the timeframes, then how they do it to a certain extent, as you say, it's down to them whether they, working from home or at certain times of the day. Just finally, so where, in terms of where you are, when do you expect sort of the events to come back in some way, shape or form in terms of opening? Have you got a roadmap to opening?
In terms of roadmap, we've done as much as we can, as I mentioned earlier, working with a venue to put the guidelines in there, working to lobby government to obviously emphasise the economic value of having exhibitions resume. We don't have a concrete date, and this year it's all been about uncertainty. Event organisers, you work towards a given date, and that is a difficulty at the moment. However, we are starting to hear positive signs. But we've accounted for that, apart from one event, which is in Q2 next year, everything is latter part of Q3, Q4 onwards. So we adjusted that early on. We financially geared the business up around that. We've adjusted as a business. And we focused primarily on our 2021, 2022 launch events, rather than focus too much about the immediate, trying to get what we can now. And we were talking about virtual. We're trying to build for the future. And that's what we've spent our time predominantly doing.
You're thinking sort of Q3 onwards.
Here in the in Oman specifically, you look at Dubai. You've got events coming back in Dubai, and it's fantastic and encouraging to see that. But you've got to look at these events, and a lot of respect to the people that have launched it, and especially to the Dubai authorities for bringing it back. They've really shown up that Dubai's open for business. But you look at these big events, and they're hurting like all of us. And you've got to ask, is it too soon to have brought them back? You've got the fear of people traveling. You've got the restrictions on travel. You've got budgets. Companies are financially scarred by this. So it's not going to be over the minute we can all open our doors again. But, as long as you financially adjust the business, that you account for that, and we accept that, and your clients accept, it's not going to be the same as what it was last edition, which I think everyone appreciates that. So it's about managing expectations.
Yeah, I think it comes back to ownership of the event as well. In the UK now, a lot of private equity has come in the last 10, 15 years. So like it or not, bean counters, they want to get back to business in some way, shape or form. But, you've got private owned. So I think, again, it comes back to what the priorities are, right, for who's owning and running the business.